You're listening to Searching for More, a podcast of the Diocese of Arlington. On this episode, Andie Pearson, a post-abortive woman who is now married with 2 living children, talks about her personal story of finding hope and forgiveness after abortion.
I knew I had to be honest. I had to put everything out. And that is where such deep healing occurred. It was amazing. I was finally able to grieve my children.
Hear Andie talk about her compelling journey, from growing up in a Catholic home to multiple abortions, alcohol and drug abuse, ultimately back to God's transformational mercy. This episode's host is Amber Roseboom, Director of Media Relations for the Diocese of Arlington.
Andie, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a real pleasure to have you here. You and I had an opportunity to talk a bit about your story, and I found it so compelling and hopeful, not just for women who have experienced the pain of abortion themselves, but for everyone. It's a message of hope and of God's mercy. So I think a lot of people are going to gain a lot from what you have to say today. So we'll go ahead and jump right in. You grew up in a Catholic family, and you took your faith very seriously.
I did at a young age.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So fast forward a few years, you find yourself in college, you develop a relationship with a young man, and you think you're in love, and you become pregnant, and you're scared. This is a story I think a lot of young women they have experienced this themselves. Can you tell us a little bit about that, where you were, what you felt, what you were experiencing?
Yes. I was actually terrified because I had so many thoughts going through my head. I let my family down. I disappointed them. There was a thought about my future. What am I going to do? This can't happen,
How old were you at that point?
I was probably about almost 19. It was right out of
young.
the transition period. And then the thought of, what's going to happen to the relationship with, this guy that I think I love, I thought I loved at that time, and what's going to happen to that relationship. So there were all these feelings and thoughts, and I was terrified. And when I finally told my boyfriend, he let me know that, no, can't happen. I'm not ready to be a father.
Yeah, we hear that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, and those words sort of hurt because here's somebody that I thought really cared about me. How could he not want our child?
It must have made you feel even more alone.
Yes. I felt very isolated because this was, this secret I'm walking around with, and I had really nobody to share or go, talk to.
Right. So in fear and that feeling of loneliness, you reach out to Planned Parenthood.
Yes.
Okay.
And I went by myself. I was going there actually to seek advice. I wasn't abortion-minded when I went in there. So, I went in and they know how to sell abortions very well. So I'm sure they played on my fears. And, they told me things that in my mind sounded good and that I wanted to hear. In my heart, it was a different story. But in my mind, they made it sound so good.
So you kind of felt torn even at that point.
Yes. They promised this is a safe procedure. It's quick and easy. Nobody has to know. Afterwards, you can go back to your normal life. So all these things, it was like, that's what I want to do. But I don't feel it's right, but that's what I should do. There were no options given to me of adoption or no, talking about, let's talk, about telling your parents.
Yeah, it's so unfortunate because you really didn't have a lot laid before you as kind of a pathway.
Right. And I left there feeling like abortion was my only choice.
So how long between then? So you go there and you get information that appears to you to be the only answer, the only out, for lack of a better way to say it. How long between that point and the point that you made the decision, I am, in fact, going to have an abortion. How long was that period of time, and kind of what were you struggling with? And did you go back to that location?
Well, they scheduled an appointment. It was made very quickly. So within a few days, I was actually sitting in the waiting room of an abortion facility.
Okay.
Yes.
And then what was that experience like?
It was very cold. It was hard because sitting there, part of me wanted to get up and run. Mm-hmm. And there were people outside at the time.
You mentioned that. That's
right.
So interesting. Yeah.
40 Days for Life hadn't started back then, but there were people still praying. And I really wanted to get up and go out to them and, help me. But there was another part or a weight that was just pushing me and holding me there. And I couldn't move. Mm-hmm. So when my name was called, I went through the doors to get myself ready to have an abortion.
Mm-hmm. When we talked about it too, you talked about how cold it was, not just the temperature, but the interaction with a doctor. He came and you hadn't met him before or anything. It was very transactional. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that? And then what you felt like when you left?
There was no introduction to the person that was going to perform the procedure. There was no formal talk of, this is what you're going to experience, this is what's going to happen. I prepared myself, went into the room, and then he came in and, started the procedure. Quick and easy was one of the promises from Planned Parenthood. And there was nothing quick or easy about it. The procedure might have been short, but for me it felt like hours. And easy, it was very painful. And it felt exactly like what was taking place. And
wow.
Yes. And afterwards, I was led to a room among other women. We were on hospital-type gurneys. It was almost like a hallway. And some women were moaning, some were crying. I noticed that they all sort of had a blank stare, like we were disconnected. And as I sat there, I was waiting for that feeling of relief. This is over. It's over. I don't have to worry anymore.
When I listen to you talk about that too, I think you really saw the pain that abortion inflicts on the woman as well. Yeah.
Yes. And I waited for that relief, and it never came. And what came was shame at that point, because what did I just do was running through my mind. What did I just do? I let a complete stranger come in the room and kill my child.
Yeah. And so you walk out of the clinic and you're not feeling the relief that you had hoped for. What were the next few years like for you?
Well, going back to when I left the facility, as I was sitting there, no staff would come around and ask or check on you, ask if you needed anything. Are you okay? Can I do anything for you? The only time there was interaction with the staff at the abortion facility was when they checked to make sure that you were ready to go. And when they released you, they handed me a piece of paper and told me if I had any problems to contact my physician. So
not even them. Go somewhere else.
Right, go somewhere else. And so that's how much I felt like they cared about me at that point, was like, there you go. And it was a long drive home. I couldn't talk to my boyfriend. I just wanted to be left alone at that time. And the days following, I would start reliving that procedure. I would vividly remember the sounds, and I still do. The coldness of the room, the women's vacant stares haunted me. Just remember seeing them. And so I fell into a depression. The relationship with my boyfriend that I was so concerned about really fell apart because I couldn't stand looking at him anymore. I didn't want him to touch me. I just wanted him to go away. So it died out rather quickly.
So it's even more isolating.
Yes. And nobody knew what was happening to me.
Mm-hmm.
So to cover the pain and depression and the thoughts that I was having, I started drinking quite a bit and going out and partying. And next thing you know, the drugs started rolling in. When the alcohol didn't seem to work, the drugs were doing a pretty good job. And I developed a promiscuous lifestyle because I felt, even though I was indifferent towards men, I felt that just that moment, I felt like someone cared about me again. And it filled just this void that was gone.
So what is your family? It sounds like you had a relatively close family too. You grew up in a Catholic family. What are they thinking at this point? Are they concerned? Can they see what's going on?
They didn't know what was going on. And, shortly after the abortion, what had happened too is I developed a fever. I got very sick. And my fever got so high, my mom took me to the emergency room. And it turned out that I had an infection. So, things had to be revealed at that point.
Okay, so you had to tell you.
So, yeah. So it wasn't a very good way for someone to find out. But so that, happened as well. And I don't think they understood then to the impact abortion has on someone emotionally. So they had no idea what was going on with me.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, it's hard to kind of connect the two pieces. Yeah, okay. Okay. Yeah,
so my sister lived in Virginia at the time, and, I was just, out of control in Pennsylvania, and she invited me to come down and stay with her. And I thought maybe a change of scenery, a change of place, I can start all over, let's just do this. And so I did, moved down to Virginia, ended up getting a job. And I thought, this is great. I'm starting all over. But it didn't take long, still drinking. And I found the drugs. So it was this cycle, and it was continuous. And during that horrific period of sexual sin, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, I would have 2 more abortions. I've had people ask me, didn't you learn from one, your first abortion? They don't understand that first one, I died along with my child.
Oh, it's so sad.
I became a person that I hated to see in the mirror. I couldn't stand looking at myself. I hated myself. And I totally, went away from my religion. God, I pushed him as far away as I could. So I became just this very cold person.
Yeah.
No feelings.
And surrounded by darkness, so it's hard at that point too to see the light and to make decisions that you're more comfortable with in the long run.
Yeah.
Okay, so so you've had a number of abortions at this point. You're doing drugs, drinking a lot of alcohol. I loved it when we talked and you said you would hear and again, you would hear a still small voice. That voice we read about in Holy Scripture, calling you back to the church. What did you think when you heard that?
Well, my mom and my sister, still not knowing what is going on with this, child, they began this little campaign of their own where between Pennsylvania and Virginia, they stopped, I think, at every church they could stop at. They would actually ask the priest to pray for me. They had masses said for me. they prayed for me. They asked prayer groups to pray for me.
That's incredible. I love it. The power of prayer,
So,
right?
Yes, yes. And there was always this little tug, come back. And I would still push away because I felt, how could God love me? How could he forgive me? I mean, look at the life I'm leading. Look what I've done. I can't.
What a lie, too, to hear that. I've done something that's too bad. I'm beyond God's mercy, when we know nothing is beyond God's mercy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So when did you ultimately come back? What drew you in?
Well, I remember going into work one day just being totally wired, from the night before, drinking and drugs, and I had obvious signs of drugs. And my boss pulled me into the office and she said, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to have to let you go. And I left and I was just like, what am I doing? And, I had every now and then thoughts of suicide. And so I think that really pushed me down to the very bottom. And so I went that day to where the seeds were planted, of my faith.
Mm-hmm.
And I went into a church. And
what did it feel like when you walked in?
I was scared.
Yeah.
I was scared.
Mm-hmm.
Because I hadn't stepped in a church for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't quite sure what to do, what to say. But I went and sat in front of the tabernacle. And I just prayed and I asked God to help me, send somebody to help me. Otherwise, I didn't know what was going to happen.
And he did.
And
Immediately.
he did. Immediately, yeah. A priest walked in, came down, and I knew if I didn't talk to him at that point, I don't know what I would have done. So by the grace of God, I got the courage to go over and talk to him.
That's awesome.
And that was the beginning of a turn for me.
That's wonderful. You walk in, you ask, and here comes a priest. That's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So you've obviously come a long way since then. And I know you talk about what confession was like, to go back to confession and to experience God's mercy. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I know that came after, so you talk with the priest and he talks to you about the importance of coming to confession.
Mm-hmm. He went, go home and I want you to write everything down and I want you to come back and see me. And there was no pressure on when, but I knew for myself I wanted to do this sooner than later. So, but I did. I went home and I just wrote everything. And that was hard because I had to, go back into all this terrible things that I was doing. And I just wanted to get rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote every single thing down. And I went to confession, and it was like a weight, such a heavy weight that was lifted from me.
That is beautiful.
Yes. And the priest, an interesting comment that he made to me months later, he thanked me. And he said, I pray for women to come back to the church that have had abortions. You are an answer to a prayer.
And that's the church that you walked into.
Yes.
It's incredible. That's incredible. What a beautiful story. So, but it's been a process.
Yes.
I mean, when we talked about that too, it was you felt that weight and you knew that God had forgiven you. Mm-hmm. But it was a process, and you still struggle even today with thoughts, reminders of those abortions. Mm-hmm. Can you talk to us a little bit about that too?
Yeah. It was a process, and that's, that confession was years ago. Mm-hmm. And that was the beginning. there were still a lot of issues that I had to tackle, because there was a lot that I was still suppressing. Even though I did confess, there were still feelings and different things. I got involved with the pro-life community. I started doing some speaking, and, I would only talk about one abortion. But why? There was 3. I had 3 children, not 1. So I was still pushing down those other 2 abortions because I didn't want to go there. So the level was so deep. But eventually, a friend of mine got me to go to a Rachel's Vineyard retreat.
Okay.
And that is where I can honestly say that was scary because I knew I had to be honest. I had to put everything out. And that is where such deep healing occurred. It was amazing. I was finally able to grieve my children. I was never able to do that. I was able to give them dignity, a name. They were somebody. They were my children.
Absolutely.
So there was a whole process there that was just so beautiful. I went in there still, even though, like I said, I went to confession and I was doing these little steps. I still went in there as a broken woman, but I came out with pieces put back together. And it was all God's time. He knew what I needed, when I needed it, where I needed it, and who He wanted me to be with. So it was all these baby steps that led me to that retreat.
This is really such a beautiful story. You can feel God's mercy through it. It's incredible. Mm-hmm. So as you tell the story too, and I imagine there are women who are listening who are going through the same thing. Mm-hmm. They've experienced the pain of abortion and they feel like they're beyond forgiveness. And they may not even be sure that they want it yet. What would you say to them?
God loves you. He really loves you. And He's waiting for you.
So true.
He's waiting for you with open arms. He wants to embrace you. He wants to put your pieces of your heart back together. And it's going to take you to go to Him. He's waiting. He loved me so much when I was in that ugly, dark state. But He loved me too much to leave me there. And it just took me to listen and follow. And that would be my advice. He loves you. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of confession. Don't be afraid to talk to a priest.
That's a beautiful message and so true and so important for so many women who are listening to this. Thank you for sharing it with us. Is there anything that I didn't ask you or that you feel that I left out that you'd want to mention?
I think, yes, for those women that maybe have taken the step to go on a healing retreat, don't stop there. Because I told you Satan likes to whisper in our ears that we're still not worthy, and he'll plant different things in your mind to try to bring you back down. So to stay above him, my advice would be continue your retreat. Do maybe a retreat once a year or twice a year. And just to keep you going. Because there's reminders out there.
That's such a good point. Yeah, thank you. To keep on that path. Like I said, thank you so much for joining us. Before we end, I just want to, for any listeners who are with us and may be particularly impacted by your story and want to find that same hope and forgiveness for themselves, the Catholic Diocese of Arlington has a program called Project Rachel that offers confidential help to women who have had an abortion. There is hope and healing. Information on Project Rachel can be found by calling 888-456-HOPE or emailing info@helpafterabortion, all one word, .org. The diocese also offers a confidential assistance program to women who are in crisis pregnancy and need help. This is through the Gabriel Project, which can be reached at 703-841-3810 or at Gabriel Project, all one word, arlingtondiocese.org. Thank you so much, Andie. That's such a wonderful story. It's so inspiring. We appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
You're listening to Searching for More. If you enjoyed this podcast, please write a review on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Also, make sure you follow the Diocese and the Arlington Catholic Herald on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And subscribe to our YouTube channels for regular videos that inspire, educate, and inform about the Catholic faith in our diocesan community.